That's right. Does that not look awesome? I mean, we are, this morning, our student ministry team and one of our high school students is going to lead us. And just watching that video after over a year without camp, we could not be more excited than we are right now because camp is coming. And I don't know about you, but summer brings excitement for all kinds of reasons. We may be excited because summer feels like we're getting closer to normal. Beyond just summer bringing suntans and pools and great weather. I mean, we've got to experience a little bit of that this week. Summer brings moments that make memories. You may be excited because summer brings moments that make memories. When you think back to your experiences, some of your best memories, I bet there are a lot of them that happen in the summer. Maybe it was a great summer vacation that you took as a family, or a unique opportunity that you made the most of during the summer. In student ministry, summer is great because for us, summer means camp. And like you saw, camp is awesome. The reason we make camp such a big deal around here is that it is a unique chance to make a moment. Getting away from daily routines, trying new things, and building new relationships all work together to be a recipe for major life change. Camp brings moments of life change. Working with kids and students, we get to see major life change all the time. So many memories are made during those early years. 5th grade science projects, middle school dances, maybe you try to block those memories out, getting your driver's license, all those are definitely great moments. But then in our teens and 20s, we take those moments up a notch with things like graduation or moving out or getting a job. Those adolescent and young adult years in particular are filled with major life events. That is when many of us set the trajectory that we'll follow for the rest of our lives. I bet that was true for you. Think back to some of your strongest memories. I bet the majority of them fall in your teen or young adult years. A book I read recently talks about this phenomenon of having so many of our strongest memories in that one period of time. They call it the reminiscence bump. The reason we tend to remember our youth so much better is that in that life stage, so much is new. There are so many firsts when we are young. There have even been studies done that show novelty or newness literally changes our perception of time. In one study, participants were shown a series of images. Most of them were identical, but every now and then a new image would appear. They were shown brown shoe, brown shoe, brown shoe, brown shoe, alarm clock, brown shoe, and so on. Even though all the images were displayed for the same amount of time, it didn't feel that way to the participants. They were convinced that the alarm clock, the pattern-breaking image, was displayed longer. Many people say that time flies as you get older, but in some ways, that is actually true. As we get into more routine and we try fewer new things, as we see more brown shoes and experience fewer alarm clocks, our perception of time literally speeds up. We get into a rut, and in our brains, time really does speed up. When you're young, new things naturally come your way. You don't have to make moments happen. Life just comes at you. There are so many firsts. But as we grow older, it becomes more important that we learn to make moments for ourselves. We need to make room for those life-changing opportunities. And that's what we want to talk about for the rest of our time together. How can you make a moment of life change for yourself? When you're a grown-up, unless you're a volunteer and you happen to be coming to serve, camp probably isn't an option for you. But that doesn't mean you can't make the most of each day and make a moment for yourself. So do you feel stuck in a rut? Have you been in the same routine for years or even decades? Do you feel like you've gradually drifted away from God or lost some of the passion for Jesus that you once had? It may be time to get out of your comfort zone and allow God to stretch you. As someone once said, we feel the most comfortable when things are certain, but we feel the most alive when they're not. Just try jumping out of a plane. Not much certainty, but plenty of alive, that's for sure. Trying something new, allowing some uncertainty in might be just what you need to breathe new life into your relationship with God. God has given you a finite amount of time on this earth. Don't let it just pass you by. Our prayer is that you'll choose today to make the most of each day. Just as the psalmist prayed many years ago, teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. If we learn to number our days, we'll start making the most of each one. This morning, we're going to look at the life of Paul in Acts chapter 9 and highlight, through Paul's story and through some of our own experiences, 3 ways that you can make a moment or make the most of your moments and allow God to get you out of your comfort zone, try something new, and breathe new life into your relationship with Jesus. First up, my friend Grace is going to share with you a little bit about her own experience.
For those of you who don't know me, my name is Grace Mays, and I'm a senior at Rochester High School. A few years ago, I found myself in the same seat many of you are in this morning. I was brand new to Westside. Whether you are new or still navigating your way through this huge campus, you know it can be really overwhelming. I was coming from a much smaller church, and I did not know the first thing about how to get involved or how to meet anybody. Soon after that, the summer before my freshman year, I was helping volunteer as a camp counselor at a local church camp. At camp, we did all types of fun activities, and as I was helping my small group get ready for the next thing, I was approached by another counselor. After talking for a few minutes, we both realized that we went to Westside. Right then and there, she made a simple invitation. She invited me to help in the kids' ministry as a volunteer on Sundays, and I said yes. That yes might seem simple. It might not seem like much of a transformational moment, but 3 years today, I realized how my one simple yes made Westside my home. As I near a new chapter in my life, college, I am so glad that little freshman me, who was scared to come to a large church full of new people and had no idea what she was doing, said yes to that invitation to serve. That one yes connected me to a whole new community. It helped give me purpose. It helped me begin to discover who God made me to be. My yes in that moment helped me begin to navigate my spiritual growth in a community of people who loved God. A community of people who now have helped me learn to love God. That was my yes, but moments like that, simple yeses, look different for everyone. The Apostle Paul, who also went by his Hebrew name Saul, had his own yes moment. Eventually, he'd go on to write a lot of the New Testament and plant dozens of churches, but it all started with one moment. In Acts 9, we are introduced to the type of man Saul was. The first verse said Saul was quite literally breathing out murderous threats against the Lord's people. Basically, Saul made it his life mission to persecute people who loved and followed Jesus. On his way to a town called Damascus to persecute more followers of Jesus, Saul was brought to his knees by a literal light flashing down from heaven. In Acts 9, verse 4, it says, "He fell to the ground and heard a voice say to him, 'Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?'" Can you imagine a literal light flashing down from above and God's voice being so clear to you? Most of the time, that's not how God speaks to us. It may not be a light shining down from heaven, but we have had opportunities, moments where we could say yes to an invitation. Take a moment now and think, when in your life have you said yes to a door that God had opened? Or on the flip side, when have you said no to an opportunity because something held you back? We have all had opportunities, but if we're not careful, we can keep walking past them and pass right by them. Also, I don't know if you guys noticed this, but God called Saul by his name, twice actually. Just as he calls Saul by his name, he calls you by your name. Even if you think you're as far gone as Saul was in the scripture, who, need I remind you, was breathing out murderous threats against God's people, God still knows your name, and he is calling out to you. Even right now, he has an invitation for you. Are you listening? As the description of Saul's moment with God goes on, Jesus appears to him and invites him to the city of Damascus. I'm sure Saul was in shock, but in that moment, Saul did the right thing. He acknowledged his need for a savior. He accepted Jesus' invitation, got up, and went. Saul said yes. What I find most compelling about the story is that even while Saul was working against Jesus, literally, Jesus was working for Saul. Jesus is seeking you even when you're not seeking him. One seemingly insignificant yes, an opportunity to benefit his kingdom, can change the trajectory of your life. It changed Saul's life, and it most definitely has changed my life. If you were really honest with yourself, are you in the same place Saul was, that I was? Or in other words, have you found your place here at Westside? What if we said yes to volunteering at church, said yes to joining a small group, or simply said yes to attending Sunday services regularly? When we say yes, we open the door to spiritual growth, because when we say yes, we begin to grow closer to God. When we take big leaps in our faith journey, when we make the most of our moments, we allow God to come through in big ways. I mean, look at how God used Saul. At the time where Saul was arguably one of the furthest men from God, God chose him to do some of his most powerful work. God wants to use each and every one of us in powerful ways. All we have to do is just let him. Look, my first yes at Westside may look completely different than the yes God may be calling you towards. My yes somehow ended me up on this stage. Your yes does not have to look like that, but the impact of saying yes in seemingly insignificant moments can lead to a breath of fresh life into your relationship with God. So say yes, church. Let yourself say yes. Let yourself see God work in your life. Say yes.
So as Saul's story continues, like Grace mentioned, he makes his way to the city of Damascus. And in Damascus, there was a disciple named Ananias. As he was praying, the Lord called out to him by name. In verse 10, Ananias responds with the words, "Yes, Lord." So God is calling out to Ananias, and Ananias' response is, "Yes, Lord." Like, Ananias knew God so well that his response during the first name calling from God was yes. Is that where you're at today? Maybe you've known God for a really long time, and you've been to Westside for a really long time, and you're to the point where you're like, yes, as soon as God says my name, he calls me to serve, he calls me to give, like, it's yes, I'm ready to go. I hope I'm to that point, and I hope I get to that point someday. Maybe for some of you, this is your first time to Westside, and you're like, I'm still trying to figure out who God is. And that's okay, because the more that you say yes, the more that you take opportunities for those moments, the more you'll get to know him. And so someday, your moment can be, yes, Lord. So anyways, back to the story. So God calls on Ananias, and Ananias says, yes, Lord. And God tells Ananias to go to Saul. At the time, Saul's reputation was well known. In verse 13, it actually says, when God tells Ananias to go, he even says, I've heard many reports about this man. Saul was a man that made a lot of bad choices. He was notorious for hunting down Christians. But this was God's moment for Ananias to say yes. To say yes to inviting God in, but also to say yes to inviting Saul in, to inviting others in. While God was preparing Ananias to go, he was preparing Saul for restoration. Like Grace mentioned, the light came down and shined in Saul's face. But it didn't just shine in his face, like it actually made him blind, and that he wasn't able to see, but he still went to Damascus. It actually made him go blind, and God tells Saul that Ananias will come to a place, place his hands on him, and when he does, his sight will be restored. So he tells Saul while he's blind, like, hey, Ananias is coming, he's going to come place his hands on you, and you're going to be healed. So Ananias' moment to say yes was actually going to change Saul's life, because we serve a God who restores. Sometimes we are the one who is being restored. Sometimes we get to help restore others, and sometimes it's both. So despite his fear, Ananias went, and Saul's sight was restored. Acts 9:18 through 19 says, immediately something like scales fell from Saul's eyes, and he could see again. He got up, was baptized, and after taking some food, he regained his strength. And Saul spent several days with the disciples in Damascus. So Saul was healed. He regained his strength. The scales fell. He was able to see again. But I don't want to miss that last line. Can we just pause there for a second? It says he spent several days with the disciples. Because yes, God's healing is so good and it made him see again. But that time that he spent with the disciples is just as important. Because Ananias said, "Yes, Lord," in a moment, Saul's life was changed. Because he faced his fear, Saul found restoration and history was made. When you say yes, you may get to help someone else's moment. When you say yes, you never know how God might use it. Do you remember the first time that you walked into Westside? Do you remember that moment? I remember mine. I had moved to Springfield, the big city, what I called Springfield when I first moved here, because you all have 3 Walmarts, and don't even get me started on the eating options, the restaurant options you have here. My mom literally called me and is concerned about how many times now I eat Chick-fil-A in a week. And it's a big city, right? It's so fun. But even in my small town, people still talked about Westside. They had been to conferences at Westside. They had gone to visit Westside. And so I was like, all right, I should check out Westside. So my first weekend while being here, I pulled onto campus, and my first thought is, my whole town could fit into this building. It's insane. And I parked my car, and I walk up to the door, and the greeter, he greeted me. He made me feel welcomed. He made me feel like I was seen, that I belonged here. He told me to get to the worship center, that I needed to go around the staircase and go through the doors. So I made my way, a little timid, through the concourse, around the staircase, and y'all, right when I did, the service let out, and all the people rushed towards me. If y'all have been here more than 10 years, y'all rushed towards me during that. It was terrifying. I joke it's one of the most terrifying moments of my life, and it's only a little bit of a joke. It qualifies up there as one of the most terrifying moments of my life. So much that I turned around, and I walked back out the front door. I didn't stick around. And I didn't come back for a whole year. I ended up emailing the website a year later, and I said, "Hey, do you have anything smaller?" And then the person emailed me back, and he said, "Yeah, we actually have small groups." And so I got connected to a small group, and because of that small group, I ended up serving in the cafe. And it was actually that small group who invited me to come and sit with them in a worship service. So I was in a small group and serving before I actually made it to where you're sitting at today. If this is your first Sunday here at Westside and you made it through those doors, congratulations, you made it farther than I did, okay? Welcome. And I'm so grateful for those people. God gave me those people in that season of life to love me and to meet me where I was at. That they were so willing to extend that invite in their moment. That moment wasn't just about them. It was about inviting me in and to get to know Jesus and to sit where you're at today. We all need moments of restoration. That was my moment of restoration. Online community, maybe you've never been in person and your moment is actually coming on campus. If you need an invite to come to campus, here it is. You're welcomed here. And if you need someone to walk through the worship center doors with you, let me know. I've got you. I'd be happy to do so. If you have been here for a while and you have been serving, you're already connected maybe to a small group, maybe your moment of restoration, maybe the moment that you need to make is not about you. You're already connected to your community, you're already serving, but who are you inviting to serve along with you? If it wasn't for my small group inviting me into that moment, I may not be here today. And that invite was 10 years ago. Maybe you've been volunteering. Maybe, in fact, you volunteer in a lot of other ministries, and you're like, where's everyone else at? Maybe that is God telling you to invite someone to come serve along with you. So maybe it's time for you today to make a moment. And maybe that moment is not about you. Maybe that moment is saying yes to inviting others, to inviting someone to serve alongside of you.
Yeah, our lives, they're made up of so many of these powerful moments, powerful ones like Grace and Hannah just taught us about, where we say yes to an invitation that God is extending to us, or we're inviting others into this grand story that God is writing for his people. These moments, they're fantastic. They may be scary at first, yes, but seeing what God can do with our willingness to trust and follow him is undoubtedly powerful. However, I think you knew this was coming. I do believe that there are moments that God can use in our lives as powerful turning point moments that we don't necessarily seek out ourselves. In fact, these are the kinds of moments that most of us actively work to avoid. Some of the most important and significant moments of our lives, the ones where we find a deeper connection with God and we're equipped with what we need to fulfill his purpose for us, are moments that hurt. Maybe feel broken, moments that we would certainly file under the heading, I never want to live that ever again, period. Broken, difficult moments of your life are not outside of our God's ability to leverage into some of the most pivotal moments of your life. But that still leaves the question, what do you do when one of these moments finds you? Because like I said, most of us are not actively seeking to live out moments that feel like this. Sometimes life just feels like it blows up on us, and you find yourself in a spot that you never intended to be. Now, to get an idea of what I mean, let's go back to Paul's story, and let's see how things continue to play out for him. Now, remember where we left off. Paul had been brought in by Ananias. He was baptized. He had this brand new community, had this profound moment where the entire trajectory of his life had changed for the better. But look at what Paul faced on the other side of all that, being met by Jesus, led down a new path, being baptized, new community. I'm going to pick up in verse 23. Look at this. It says, after many days had gone by, there was a conspiracy among the Jews to kill him. And it doesn't just stop there. Verse 26, when he came to Jerusalem, he tried to join the disciples, Peter and John and James and all these guys. But they were all afraid of him, not actually believing that he was really a disciple. Doesn't just stop there. Just a few verses later, 29, he talked and debated with the Hellenistic Jews, but they tried to kill him. I mean, it's just like, wait a minute. I don't know about you, but these are not the kinds of moments that I would expect to see happen at this point in the story, especially after hearing about all the amazing things that happened with Paul before this. And believe me, church, it didn't end there for Paul. Sometimes we find ourselves in the middle of a moment that is just simply not a good moment, just like Paul. A moment where we often ask, how did I get here? Maybe things don't go as planned. People said or did things that we never would have expected or seen coming from them. Sickness, loss of a job, failing health. It can feel like we have been kicked right off of this mountain that we worked so hard to get to the top of and are now stuck down in this valley looking up, asking the question, God, why is this happening? And for many of us who experience moments like this, when it feels like our expectations are let down or we are in the middle of a pain or a hurt or a struggle, church, there is something that I desperately need you to know this morning. The valley, man, that is where God does some of his best work. Just look at Paul. Though he experienced significant hardship, I mean, that's an understatement, to be what God called him to be, God used that in profound ways beyond even his wildest imagination. His words from prisons into other churches that he planted eventually became scripture. Yeah, the Bible, like sitting in prison, that's what happened. His commitment to spreading the message of Jesus far and wide to the ends of the earth is the reason why in 2021 Western America, we're all sitting here talking about this man named Jesus. It's amazing. And the game changer for Paul's life, instead of being defeated by those moments, Paul chose to do something radical, and it's an invitation that is available to each and every one of us. He invited God into it. He invited God into the struggle. He stayed the course, and he was patient. He knew that our God is a God of restoration and new life, and it could be very well that for you, like Paul, you are in the middle of one of these low moments. Please, don't be discouraged. I know, because I'm just the same way. No one likes to be in a place of waiting. But sometimes that's the very thing that we're called to do. Be patient and trust. God is working in your struggle, even if you aren't aware of it yet. I promise. See, I was 11 years old when my parents sat me and my brother and my sister down and told us the one thing that all kids are terrified of hearing from their parents from the get-go. We're getting a divorce. It was like getting blindsided. A moment I didn't cause had found me. And never would I have imagined in that moment that moment could have been used in any positive way. I mean, honestly, what is positive about that? Good things don't come from broken things, right? Yet here I am 24 years later walking with students who are experiencing the exact same thing, only now I can talk to them about a hope that they can hold on to. I now have step-parents that I am incredibly thankful for and love a lot. Turns out it ended up becoming one of the most pivotal, important, growing moments of my entire life, but in the moment, it felt like it was anything but that. So think about your own life for a moment. When most of us look back at turning point moments that God used to strengthen us or guide us down a new or better path, it's usually on the other side of a struggle or a challenge, right? We may not be able to see the full picture, but church, God always can. So do you feel like you're in a valley right now? God can make it a powerful moment. In fact, he probably is already at work. God has the ability to take that and strengthen you in a way that you never thought possible.
If you are in a low place today, you're struggling through a valley, God is inviting you to lean in. Patience may be hard, but he wants to bring restoration. He's working even now to use this moment to bring hope. Or if you're stuck in a rut, if you've gotten comfortable and are going through the motions, it's time for a change. It's time for something new. Don't let life just pass you by. Say yes to the moment that God is calling you into. Invite someone else in. Lean in and trust God to bring restoration. As we've talked this morning, has something come to mind? Has your heart been beating fast about a step you need to take or an invitation you need to make? Is there something that you've been avoiding? Something you wonder if God is calling you to, but fear or uncertainty has held you back? What if you decided today to just say yes? When you look back on this season of your life, what do you want to remember? Will it just be another April, gradually coming out of a long COVID winter, wondering when things will come back to normal? Or will you look back on this season, on this day, on this moment, and remember it as the time when you said yes? When you broke through the monotony and you stepped out in faith, when you trusted God to do something hard. Today could be the day. Right now could be your moment. Make the most of it. Say yes.